Coming up on Arirang News, South Korea enacts stricter virus prevention measures ahead of a major national holiday. For 2 weeks, restaurants, cafes, and other facilities have to take extra care to enforce social distancing, and there'll be more closures of high-risk facilities. President Moon Jae-in offers his condolences to the family of the South Korean man shot dead last week by North Korean troops. The two Koreas, he says, need to work together to uncover the full truth about the man's death. And in November, the Korea Sale Festa, an annual shopping event, will be held, but with an emphasis on non-contact shopping, mostly online. It's 5 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. I'm Devin Whiting. From this Wednesday, South Korea will be celebrating the Thanksgiving holiday of Chuseok. It's a time when people normally travel and get together with family, but this year, to stop COVID-19, there'll be some extra restrictions in place. Kim Bo-kyung has the details.
As small-sized cluster infections continue to pop up in South Korea, local health authorities remain alert. To prevent another wave hitting during the Chuseok holiday period, the government's Chuseok Special Virus Prevention Period has started.
Starting Monday, we will apply more detailed and stricter preventive COVID-19 measures for 2 weeks.
In accordance with the Special Virus Prevention Period, new regulations will be added to social distancing level 2. Gatherings of more than 50 people indoors and more than 100 people outdoors will remain prohibited. That means local festivals and traditional games will have to be held with a limited number of spectators. Professional sports, including soccer, baseball, and the popular traditional Korean wrestling, sirim, will be played without any spectators. In the capital area, stricter measures are imposed on multi-use facilities. Restaurants, coffee shops, and bakeries with 20 or more seats will have to keep customers at least a meter apart. If impossible to do so, customers will need to sit 1 seat or even a table apart or have barriers between the tables. Customers at movie theaters, PC rooms, and concert halls in Seoul and its surrounding area also have to sit a seat apart, wear face masks, and sign an entry log. Amusement parks and water parks need to limit the number of visitors to half their capacity and only take people who have made reservations. In addition to that, 11 high-risk facilities in the capital region, such as nightclubs, hostess bars, and singing rooms, will be closed for 2 weeks. National and public facilities, such as museums and libraries that are considered relatively safer, will reopen, but they will be required to limit their number of visitors to half the usual amount. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
President Moon Jae-in has offered his condolences to the family of the South Korean government worker shot dead last week by North Korean troops. In a meeting with his top aides on Monday, Moon said that the government is sorry for the shock and anger caused to the South Korean people, calling it a regrettable and unfortunate incident.
희생자가 어떻게 북한 해역으로 가게 되었는지 경위와 상관없이 유가족들의 상심과 비탄에 대해 깊은 애도와 위로의 말씀을 드립니다. 이유 여하를 불문하고 국민의 생명과 안전을 지켜야 하는 정부로서 대단히 송구한 마음입니다.
President Moon stressed the need to uncover the full truth and to find ways to stop this from happening again. That said, he highlighted the need for communication and cooperation between the two Koreas, calling on Pyongyang to reopen the inter-Korean military communication line it severed earlier this year. The president also noted the swift and rare apology from North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, saying that it reflects his determination to prevent ties from breaking down. The South Korean official went missing last Monday from a patrol boat while on duty near Yeonpyeong-do Island off the country's west coast. South Korea's military said later that North Korean troops had shot the man and then burned his body, while Pyongyang claims its troops set fire to a floating object the man had been using, not his body. On Sunday, Seoul requested that the two Koreas launch a joint probe. South Korea's top nuclear envoy is in Washington for talks with his counterpart there about North Korea's denuclearization. And after Chuseok, Seoul will be hosting China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi and U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Yoon Jung-min reports.
Arriving in Washington Sunday, South Korea's top nuclear envoy Lee Do-hoon said he will be discussing issues related to the Korean peninsula with his U.S. counterpart Stephen Biegun, including the recent killing of a South Korean national by North Korean soldiers.
Since the U.S. State Department says it fully supports the South Korean government on this particular issue, we'll focus on how we can work together.
Asked about the possibility of another Pyongyang-Washington summit before the U.S. presidential election in November, Lee said it depends on North Korea. Lee and Biegun are also set to discuss how to revive the long-stalled denuclearization talks, as well as the issue of trying to declare an official end to the 1950 to 1953 Korean War. Next week, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is set to visit South Korea and Japan to bolster Washington's alliances in the Greater Pacific region against China ahead of the U.S. presidential election. Sources say that at around the same time, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi is likely to travel to South Korea and Japan as well. This comes after senior Chinese diplomat Yang Jiechi traveled to Busan last month for talks with South Korea's National Security Advisor Seo Hoon. South Korea's presidential office also revealed that Deputy Security Advisor Kim Hyun-jong visited the U.S. earlier this month to discuss bilateral and regional affairs. Earlier this month, Seoul's Vice Foreign Minister Choi Jong-gun also met with U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Stephen Biegun. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
This year, the Korea Sale Festa, an annual shopping event, is going non-contact. And the hope is it'll boost spending and the economy. Finance Minister Hong Nam-ki said Monday that the Korea Sale Festa will run from November 1st to the 15th, mainly online and through non-contact platforms like home shopping and drive-through stores. The government will also cut taxes for certain stores. Minister Hong said the retail campaign is aimed at helping small business owners in particular. The company that manages K-pop boy band BTS is going public next month, and they've set their IPO price at $115 a share. That's the top end of their proposed range, after bids were taken from institutional investors last week. In 2 days of book building, Big Hit Entertainment drew over 1,400 institutional investors from Korea and abroad, with bids outnumbering offers by 1,117 to 1, which is one of the highest ratios ever. It's higher than the ratio for SK Biopharmaceuticals when it went public this summer, but not as high as Kakao Games, whose IPO last month had a bid ratio of almost 1,500 to 1. Retail investors will be able to subscribe on October 5th and 6th ahead of the IPO later in the month. The U.S. Commerce Department has now banned American companies from sending technology to China's biggest chip maker, SMIC. The Trump administration is concerned that equipment going to SMIC could be used by the Chinese military. Kim Hyo-sun has this report.
The Trump administration is tightening trade restrictions on China's largest chip maker, Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corporation, or SMIC. With the move, American computer chip companies will be prohibited from importing SMIC's technology without a prior export license. This is similar to the restrictions imposed on Huawei. The U.S. Commerce Department expressed concerns over an, quote, unacceptable risk that equipment SMIC has imported could be used for military purposes. In response, SMIC told Reuters that the company provides services solely for commercial end users and end users, stressing it has no relationship with the Chinese military. The move will hit Beijing's aggressive plan to develop its semiconductor sector. Pundits also say it could benefit South Korean chip manufacturers like Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, especially with Samsung being able to mass-produce memory chips using the 7-nanometer process, which SMIC aimed to achieve by late 2021. In a separate move, American lawmakers are mulling subsidies of about $25 billion to boost U.S. chip production capacity. While it's uncommon for Washington to pour such large subsidies to any sector, Japanese media reports that the move comes as the Trump administration wants to protect its own industries over fears that excessive outsourcing to China could be a national security risk. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
Time now for an in-depth look at the market news on this Monday, and for that I'm joined on the line by Dr. Yang Chuseok, professor of economics at the Catholic University of Korea. Professor Yang, good to have you back on.
Happy to be here.
Well, stocks in New York ended last week on a high note. Here in Seoul, the Kospi and the Kosdaq strongly higher as well today. What's the story in the global markets and in Korea?
Okay, well, the U.S. indices started rising on Wednesday, U.S. time, and they have been rising on Friday, but they're still really a lot below the highs that we saw on early September. So it seems like they've readjusted a bit, and now they're going to start on the upward path again. But it might be slower than it was last time because I think there's more awareness that there is a disconnect between the real economy and the stock market, and the presidential elections as well as the congressional elections are coming up in slightly more than a month. So that may also act as sort of a weight on the stock market. Now, the other international markets were really mixed. It seems like there's no real thrust, either upward or downward in the market. So it seems like it's being affected by minor factors, minor hopes, like hopefully there will be a coronavirus, but it seems like it's being affected by this and that more than anything else. The European indices were mixed at the end of last week. CAC and DAX were heading downward, while FTSE and Euro 50 were rising upwards. In the Asian markets, Nikkei was rising very sharply toward the end of last week, and it rose today as well. Shanghai was falling, though it's rising currently today. Hong Kong is rising slightly at the end of last week and today. Kospi and Kosdaq, well, they started the recovery after some large falls last week. They started recovery on last Thursday. It went up quite a bit today. Kospi went up by 1.29%, Kosdaq by 3.42%, and somewhat unusual on the days when we have a rising index, individuals sold rather than bought today.
Interesting point there. Now, we just heard a story about the Trump administration banning effectively American companies from sending technology to China's biggest chip maker, SMIC. This could have benefits for South Korean chip makers. What do you make of this story, Professor?
Okay, well, there is a potential. In 2019, only 16% of semiconductors used in China were actually produced in China, and China did recognize the low production within the country as one of the weaknesses. So in their 2025 manufacturing plan, they were trying to raise the percentage of semiconductors produced in China up to 70%. And SMIC was China's big attempt to increase domestic production. It's the largest foundry operation in China, and 60% of its sales were going to China and Hong Kong. But still, it does reflect the behindness of Chinese semiconductor technology. Apparently, half of SMIC manufacturing equipment is imported from the United States, so this technology ban will hurt SMIC quite a bit. And SMIC is behind Samsung and Taiwan's TSMC in terms of technology. So this will hurt the firm definitely, but they may still be able to supply lower technology chips to the Chinese firms which need semiconductors. SMIC accounts for about 4.5% of the global foundry market compared to 53.9% for TSMC and 17.4% for Samsung. So even if SMIC is placed out of the market, it probably will mean some gains for Samsung. Qualcomm of the United States apparently were looking at Samsung and TSMC to take over some of their chip production from SMIC, but President Trump is putting more and more firms on the blacklist, more and more Chinese firms on the blacklist. So it remains to be seen whether the cut in Korea's exports to China will outweigh this additional demand that comes from non-Chinese firms that seeks replacement for SMIC. But right now, it looks like it'll be a wash.
Got it. Well, it's the start of a new week, Professor, though most of it will be a holiday here in Korea. Still, what's on your radar this week?
Okay, so because it's a holiday, there's not that much statistics coming out in Korea. The most interesting one is probably going to be the August industrial activities report, but because it reports activities in August, it's probably too far behind the times because of the coronavirus. Things are moving very rapidly. September Business Sentiment Index and Economic Sentiment Index is also coming up. That will probably be more interesting. That'll give a state of mind on how firms and consumers feel about the current economy. Foreign statistics, the most interesting one is going to be U.S. unemployment rate and wage data, because this will be the last unemployment rate that will be revealed before the United States presidential elections. But likely anti-Trump side and pro-Trump side, both sides will see what it wants to see. On the anti-Trump side, employment will still be at a historically low level. The economy will not recover by this month. But the pro-Trump side will probably see that, it did fall considerably because of the coronavirus, but U.S. has been making up jobs rather rapidly in the last few months. So both sides will see probably what they want to see.
Got it. All right, Professor, thanks so much for coming on today. Have a safe and happy holiday.
Thank you, and have a nice Chuseok.
Now, fast food chains in South Korea are having to sell their hamburgers without tomatoes because of a shortage. The typhoons and flooding that hit this summer wiped out crops, and so McDonald's, Burger King, Lotteria, and others, when they have no tomatoes, are offering discounts and/or drink coupons. Tomato supplies are expected to get back to normal by late October. Researchers have found that a certain bacteria grown from kimchi can kill viruses. This is according to South Korea's National Institute of Biological Resources, which started the research in April. The researchers say it's a lactobacillus, safe for humans, and it was tested on a broad range of viruses, including the flu virus. They say it could be a natural alternative to chemical disinfectants. Their research was published in the international journal Pharmaceuticals. And that does it for this newscast. Thank you for watching.